Now, this is the final section of Chapter 7, and it's called Beyond Bureaucracy. If it was Max Weber who first defined bureaucracy and predicted its triumph, Warren Bennis may go down in sociological textbooks as the man who first convincingly predicted its demise and sketched the outlines of the organisation that are springing up to replace it. At precisely the moment when the outcry against bureaucracy was reaching its peak of shrillness on American campuses and elsewhere, Bennis, a social psychologist and professor of industrial management, predicted flatly that in the next 25 to 50 years we will all participate in the end of bureaucracy. He urged us to begin looking beyond bureaucracy. Thus, Bennis argues that while various proponents of good human relations have been fighting bureaucracy on humanistic grounds and for Christian values, bureaucracy seems more likely to founder on its inability to adapt to rapid change. Bureaucracy, he says, thrives in a highly competitive, undifferentiated, and stable environment, such as the climate of its youth, the Industrial Revolution. A pyramidal structure of authority with power concentrated in the hands of a few was and is an eminently suitable social arrangement for routinized tasks. However, the environment has changed in just those ways which make the mechanism most problematic. Stability has vanished. Each age produces a form of organisation appropriate to its own tempo. During the long epoch of agricultural civilization, societies were marked by low transience. Delays in communication and transportation slowed the rate at which information moved. The pace of individual life was comparatively slow, and organisations were seldom called upon to make what we would regard as high-speed decisions. The age of industrialism brought a quickened tempo to both individual and organisational life. Indeed, it was precisely for this reason that bureaucratic forms were needed. For all that they seem lumbering and inefficient to us, they were, on the average, capable of making better decisions faster than the loose and ramshackle organisations that preceded them. With all the rules codified, with a set of fixed principles indicating how to deal with various work problems, the flow of decisions could be accelerated to keep up with the faster pace of life brought by industrialism. Weber was keen to notice this, and he pointed out that the extraordinary increase in the speed by which public announcements as well as economic and political facts are transmitted exerts a steady and sharp pressure in the direction of speeding up the tempo of administrative reaction. He was mistaken, however, when he said, "The optimum of such reaction time is normally attained only by a strictly bureaucratic organisation," for it is now clear that the acceleration of change has reached so rapid a pace that even bureaucracy can no longer keep up. Information surges through society so rapidly, drastic changes in technology come so quickly, that newer, even more instantly responsive forms of organisation must characterise the future. What then will be the characteristics of the organisations of super-industrial society? The key word, says Bennis, will be temporary. There will be adaptive, rapidly changing temporary systems. Problems will be solved by task forces composed of relative strangers who represent a set of diverse professional skills. Executives and managers in this system will function as coordinators between the various transient work teams. They will be skilled in understanding the jargon of different groups of specialists, and they will communicate across groups, translating and interpreting the language of one into the language of another. People in this system will, according to Bennis, be differentiated not vertically according to rank and role, but flexibly and functionally according to skill and professional training. Because of the high rate of movement back and forth from one transient team to another, he continues, there will be a reduced commitment to work groups. While skills in human interaction will become more important due to the growing needs for collaboration in complex tasks, there will be a concomitant reduction in group cohesiveness. People will have to learn to develop quick and intense relationships on the job and learn to bear the loss of more enduring work relationships. This then is a picture of the coming adhocracy, the fast-moving, information-rich, kinetic organisation of the future, filled with transient cells and extremely mobile individuals. From this sketch, moreover, it is possible to deduce some of the characteristics of the human beings who will populate these new organisations, and who to some extent are already to be found in the prototype organisations of today. What emerges is dramatically different from the stereotype of the organisation man. For just as the acceleration of change and increased novelty in the environment demand a new form of organisation, they demand too a new kind of person. Three of the outstanding characteristics of bureaucracy were, as we have seen, permanence, hierarchy, and a division of labour. These characteristics moulded the human beings who manned that organisation. Permanence, the recognition that the link between man and organisation would endure through time, brought with it a commitment to the organisation. The longer the man stayed within its embrace, the more he saw his past as an investment in the organisation, the more he saw his personal future as dependent upon that of the organisation. Longevity bred loyalty. In work organisations, this natural tendency was powerfully reinforced by the knowledge that termination of one's links with the organisation very often meant a loss of the means of economic survival. In a world racked by scarcity for the many, a job was precious. The bureaucratic was thus immobile and deeply oriented towards economic security. To keep his job, he willingly subordinated his own interests and convictions to those of the organisation. Power-laden hierarchies through which authority flowed wielded the whip by which the individual was held in line. Knowing that his relationship with his organisation would be relatively permanent, or at least hoping that it would be, the organisation man looked within for approval. Rewards and punishments came down the hierarchy to the individual, so that the individual, habitually looking upwards at the next rung of the hierarchical ladder, became conditioned to subservience. Thus, the wishy-washy organisation man, the man without personal convictions or without the courage to make them evident, it paid to conform. Finally, the organisation man needed to understand his place in the scheme of things. He occupied a well-defined niche, performed actions that were also well defined by the rules of the organisation, and he was judged by the precision with which he followed the book. Faced by relatively routine problems, he was encouraged to seek routine answers. Unorthodoxy, creativity, venturesomeness were discouraged, for they interfered with the predictability required by the organisation of its component parts. The embryonic adhocracies of today demand a radically different constellation of human characteristics. In place of permanence, we find transience, high mobility between organisations, never-ending reorganisations within them, and a constant generation of decay of temporary work groupings. Not surprisingly, we witness a decline in old-fashioned loyalty to the organisation and its substructures. Writing about young executives in American industry today, Walter Guzzardi Jr. declares, "The agreements between modern man and modern organisation are not like the laws of modern man and are not like the laws of the Medes and the Persians. They were not made to stand forever. The man periodically examines his own attitude towards the organisation and gauges its attitudes towards him. If he doesn't like what he sees, he tries to change it. If he can't change it, he moves. Says executive recruiter George Peck, the number of top executives with their resumes in this desk drawer is amazing. The old loyalty felt by the organisation man appears to be going up in smoke. In its place, we are watching the rise of professional loyalty. In all of the techno societies, there is a relentless increase in the number of professional, technical, and other specialists. In the United States, between 1950 and 1969 alone, their number has more than doubled, and this class continues to grow more rapidly than any other group in the workforce. Instead of operating as individual entrepreneurial freelancers, millions of engineers, scientists, psychologists, accountants, and other professionals have entered the ranks of organisation. What has happened as a result is a neat dialectical reversal. Veblen wrote about the industrialisation of the professional. Today we are observing the professionalisation of industry. Thus John Gardner declares, the loyalty of the professional man is to his profession and not to the organisation that may house him at any given moment. Compare the chemist or electronics engineer in a local plant with the non-professional executives in the same plant. The men the chemist thinks of as colleagues are not those who occupy neighbouring offices, but his fellow professionals wherever they may be throughout the country, even throughout the world. Because of his fraternal ties with widely dispersed contemporaries, he himself is highly mobile, but even if he stays in one place, his loyalty to the local organisation is rarely of the same quality as that of the true organisation man. He never quite believes in it. The rise of the professions means that modern-day large-scale organisation has been heavily infiltrated by men who have an entirely different concept of what organisation is about. In effect, these men are outsiders working within the system. At the same time, the term profession is itself taking on a new meaning. Just as the vertical hierarchies of bureaucracy break down under the combined impact of new technology, new knowledge and social change, so too do the horizontal hierarchies that have until now divided human knowledge. The old boundaries between specialties are collapsing. Men increasingly find that the novel problems thrust at them can be solved only by reaching beyond narrow disciplines. The traditional bureaucrat puts electrical engineers in one compartment and psychologists in another. Indeed, engineers and psychologists in their own professional organisations assumed an airtight distinction between their spheres of knowledge and competence. Today, however, in the aerospace industry, in education and in other fields, engineers and psychologists are frequently thrown together in transient teams. New organisations reflecting these sometimes exotic intellectual mergers are springing up all around the basic professions, so that we begin to find subgroupings of biomathematicians, psychopharmacologists, engineer librarians, and computer musicians. Distinctions between the disciplines do not disappear, but they become finer, more porous, and there is a constant reshuffling process. In this situation, even professional loyalties turn into short-term commitments, and the work itself, the task to be done, the problem to be solved, begins to elicit the kind of commitment hitherto reserved for the organisation. Professional specialists, according to Bennis, seemingly derive their rewards from inward standards of excellence, from their professional societies, and from the intrinsic satisfaction of their task. In fact, they are committed to the task, not the job, to their standards, not their boss, and because they have degrees, they travel. They are not good company men. They are uncommitted, except to the challenging environments where they can play with problems.